Hey everybody, we are live and back. I'm here with some powerhouse educators. We're live on Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope. I'm going to hand it over to one of our vice presidents who oversees strategy from our K-12 perspective, Trenton Goebel. Trenton, take it away.
Thank you, Mark. Well, welcome everybody. I'm excited to introduce our panel today. We are, these webinars are really focused on leadership. We've done a lot of internally at Instructure, a lot of webinars on how to use our tools and strategies and things like that. But this is really an opportunity for us to talk with leaders from across the country and learn more about the challenges that they're facing, the way they're addressing those challenges, and hopefully learn together. So as Mark said, I'm Trenton Goebel. I want to introduce our panel, but I want to have them introduce themselves. Some of you, if you saw our last webinar on leadership, will recognize Shara. But we have two new guests, and we'll start with Nancy and then let Shara and then Rich introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nancy Brightwell. I am from Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools in North Carolina. I have been a school administrator for 20 years, and presently I'm an executive director overseeing and supporting about 19 high need schools.
Great.
Hi, I'm Shara Johnson. I am from Nebraska, and I am an old math teacher that turned curriculum director, turned Canvas enthusiast. My job currently is I work at the consortium level in our state, and I support school districts using technology and blended learning. So I support 14 schools that use Canvas in our area.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Rich Wilson. I am the Director of Assessment and Curriculum for the Olathe School District in Kansas, which is a suburb of Kansas City. And we are about a 30,000 student district with 5 high schools. And my primary job is on the curriculum and assessment side. And we are a recent Mastery Connect adopter. We haven't moved into the Canvas space yet, but we are really enthusiastic about the formative assessing piece that we've been provided by Mastery Connect.
And so one of the things I love about this group is we have diversity in terms of our geographic locations, but also in kind of the size and scope of our districts and the people we're working with. Nancy works at one of the largest school districts in the country. Rich is working in that still very, very large district in Kansas. And then Shara, who's serving a more rural environment in Nebraska. And I think what we'll find is there's a lot of commonality amongst whether you're in a big district, a rural district, an urban district. We're all dealing with challenges. In our last webinar, we talked about communication and the challenges that folks are having around communication. And we really targeted communication from the standpoint of what we called the fundamental 5, which is what we use internally in our leadership from our Center for Leadership and Learning to support school leaders in the adoption of Canvas. And that's really our ability to address these fundamental 5 questions from the standpoint of communication. I'll share what those are, but I want to highlight today, we're going to be talking about consistency. So once you figure out communication and how you're communicating these things, I think that kind of next level challenge is consistency. With all of the changes as students have moved to their home environments and we're learning from home, learning remotely, learning virtually, however that is happening, trying to create some degree of consistency, I think, is important. And it also goes to, I think, these equity issues. You know, consistency is about equity in my mind, and we'll talk to the group about that. But I wanted to review a little bit about the fundamental 5, because I think that will help us lead into that consistency conversation. So last time we talked about communication from that perspective of these 5 questions. And these, we really feel like as people were transitioning to home, these are the 5 questions that not only are your students asking, but parents are really asking. And that is, what am I supposed to do? Right? Like that's number 1. What am I supposed to do? I think parents are saying, what are students supposed to do? How can I help my student at home? The second one is, when is it due? And I think that's a really interesting, we had a really interesting conversation because you see a full gamut of how people are responding that. Some people are saying nothing is due. We're working off of a different paradigm because it's really hard for us to collect work, grade work, and do those types of things, where others are trying to keep it much more consistent. That third question is, how did I do? You know, being able to maintain and communicate with students their progress. Having that continue is really important. How do our students know how they're doing right now as they've transitioned to this working from home environment? And the fourth one, I think, is maybe the most important right now, when students are asking, can you help me? Right? How are we providing lines of communication for our students to be able to continue to get feedback from us and to maintain that support? And that support right now may be taking a lot of different forms. We know that schools are struggling as they're working to make sure students are fed, making sure students have access to the things that they really need to function in a classroom environment. And that fifth question that we talked about last time was, what more can I do? And I think that really applies in today's world as we think about finding alternative ways for students to show us that they're continuing to learn, right? That it's not just, here's the worksheet or here's the packet and things to fill out, but what more can we do to make school engaging and interesting, and also have it personalized in a way that allows students to show us that they're learning given their certain set of circumstances. So with that review, I want to then take that and say, how are we making this consistent? How are we creating some degree of consistency in our schools? Nancy, in a gigantic, humongous district like yours, you guys cover, you know, probably very high socioeconomic environments to people who are really struggling. How do we create some degree of consistency, an experience for our kids? What are you guys doing in Charlotte Mac to address those challenges?
Right. And you're right. I mean, we have just that full gamut in terms of, and we're still struggling with how we try to get devices, Wi-Fi hotspots out to students, but we're trying not to let that get in the way of where we're moving this week, which is actually new learning. So from a consistency standpoint, we started with trying to ensure that parents had kind of a one-stop shop approach. So we are a Canvas district. And so we basically kind of set parameters that from 4th grade to 12th grade, instruction was going to be delivered through Canvas, and our students knew how to get onto Canvas already. So again, it was a familiar platform. Our challenge then was to get the content into Canvas for this virtual learning. We agreed that for young students pre-K through 3rd grade, from a consistency standpoint, that it wouldn't be as developmentally appropriate to have their learning all be digital. So instead, we've gone to kind of a learning packet approach. And we continue to actually copy like learning packets as we're still trying to solve for connectivity issues, even in those upper grades. But the bottom line is just trying to create consistent master schedules with amount of time. So our students are going anywhere between 2 to 3 hours per day. And then again, having kind of a central place where folks log on and a central format for what that looks like within Canvas or within those packets.
That's super interesting. Cheryl, I'm interested to hear your approach. Is it similar? And before you answer, I do want to remind folks, if they have questions or they want to add things to the live comments, to please do that as we work through that. But Cheryl, tell us what it's like for you guys as you're trying to manage the same challenges around creating consistent learning environments for students.
So a lot of what Nancy said is right on. We do have a couple of districts, and we've had this huge training push as soon as this all came down the pipe. And we're a couple weeks behind everybody else in Nebraska. I mean, like we're just working on our continuity plans for our districts now. We're just starting to do new learning. But as far as like the whole virus and how it's impacting people, we seem to be a couple weeks behind. And so some of our schools are still scrambling, but we've had this giant push for training. And one of the things that a lot of my administrators have said, this is not the time for everybody to do their own thing. Like we have in the previous times, we might have supported, teachers using Google Classroom, and we might have supported teachers using a different platform in Canvas. But right now we have to remember that we need to do what's best for kids. And so we're all going to use the same platform, and we are all going to use the same homepage, and we are going to try to do things similarly for kids to keep things consistent. So I've appreciated that, because in the past we might not have had that. We're trying to give teachers autonomy and give them choice, which is great. But we're really trying to focus on what's best for kids. And like Nancy said, having that central place stemming from maybe a website. Some other things that some of my districts have done that I think are really providing comfort. I have one district that does a Facebook Live every week, same exact time. Their superintendent is getting on and basically letting the parents know and the kids know what's going on. They're giving them updates. They're also talking about things that the health department's talking about, trying to update them not only like what's going on with the school district, but also what's going on within the area as far as health is concerned. So I know a lot of people have appreciated that. We have another district that has been super consistent. They've done most of them actually, parents can pick up, drop off exact same times every week. I think there's some comfort in having that constant, be a consistent thing. We know what to expect. And so a lot of our schools are doing their own thing. Something that we've done at the consortium level is that we are now creating grade level meeting times. So we've created a first grade collaboration, a second grade collaboration, and we're meeting every week to allow all 16 of our district's teachers to come on and share what's going well, what they might need help with, allows them a place to vent, a place to look for ideas, a place to kind of console one another. So that has been really helpful these last few weeks as well. And I think they're appreciating that time to collaborate. So that's something we're doing every week and trying to be consistent about as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, the consoling part, right? Like, I think there is something about the social emotional element that our people are under stress, our teachers are under stress, our students, and even more so, our parents are super under stressed at home, whether, trying to work with a job and trying to make sure that kids are continuing to learn. And I think, Rich, for you, you've had to take that role of both assessment and curriculum director. You're the point of the spear. You're the people that your teachers are looking to for direction. How have you guys managed that in Olathe?
Yeah, so our situation different even from these two. Kansas was one of the first states to shut the school buildings down, and so we had a mad scramble to figure out how are we going to serve our 30,000 kids when we don't have an LMS, and we have schools that, although we are aligned to a large degree, there is some independent contractor piece to that has allowed them to be their own schools. But one of the things that was really important for us, and we had this additional piece too, is that Kansas City, Missouri, of which we're essentially a suburb, we had the stay-at-home order that happened right in the middle of all of this. So we were super locked down. And so what we ended up doing was we created a Google website that we were able to place lessons and activities for kids, and we rolled them out. We're rolling them out on a weekly basis. So yesterday we launched week 2, and our K-8, pre-K-8 has one template that they're using that invites kids to explore an idea. There's a little bit of new learning in some video work done by our teachers. And then there's opportunities for them to express that learning and then to go deeper with it. And then in high school, we we created a situation in which we have a template for all of our courses. But one of the things, I think Nancy was the one who said this, was these are all exactly the same. The template looks identical from grade level to grade level, course to course. And so there's the ability for parents and students to have the same expectation no matter what link they open up. But what we've had to do, our state did a really nice job early on about giving some guidance about what they felt was kind of not only a stopgap, but how do you finish the semester, and assuming we're able to open schools again in the fall, like how do you determine those critical standards that are going to bridge the gap? And so those are the ones that we have incorporated into all of our grade levels, subject areas, and our courses in middle and high school. But the other monster in all of this is how do you support a large district? Although we think we're large, I listen to Nancy talk. I'm like, maybe we're not. We're large enough where we have up to 30% of our families that do not have internet access, and another large percentage of those that have internet access, but their bandwidth is pretty tight. And so you have two parents that are trying to access that at home, and now you've got kids that are trying to access that. And so we have tried to be, we thought very like Maslow's order of needs, right? Like we are feeding those kids Monday through Friday that are on free and reduced, and we are creating packet learning for every subject area, grade level, specials. We have opportunities for them to take advantage of those because we know that's what kids really like. And but the hard part is like what's your common denominator, right? You have these high level gifted kids, and they're wanting direct instruction 6 hours a day versus kids that are just struggling to eat. And we have done our best to make sure that we are trying to address as many of those needs as possible. But I mean, I think all of us will admit it, that is a target hard to hit. But the consistency that we are trying to show is, I mean, I think that's been kind of our saving grace, that since we haven't deviated, we've asked schools not to deviate, teachers not to deviate, but just to stay with us as a district to support all kids and all families. SEL, internet safety, these are all part of our lessons as well. But it has been a journey. There were some 18 to 20 hour work days for about 2 weeks for a lot of us to get that up and running, but so far it's been really, really good.
I think that's really one of the powerful things about having this conversation, especially with people that kind of span a large geographic and large size difference in their districts, is to show how much in common we really have. That as if you're a school leader, a district level leader somewhere, wondering, are we on par with, are we doing the right things? Sometimes it's easy to feel like when you're on an island doing this, that maybe you're not measuring up, or maybe the challenges that you're facing are unique. And I'm sure there are plenty of unique situations for all three of you. But the reality is we're more alike in that this hit everybody out of nowhere. In terms of like, I think we all kind of thought maybe there could be some ramifications, but as far as shutting down schools, some schools were on spring break and they just never came back, which didn't really give teachers time to prep or get anything ready. And so all of those things created challenges that now we're trying to say, how do we make sure that we kind of dial in and create some degree of consistency? And one thing that I hear from parents in particular, and obviously from students, is what about grading? How do we have some degree of consistency in grading? And I know that that's an area where there's quite a bit of, different ideas about how do we continue to maintain some sort of traditional, or grading system, or are we moving away from that? Is that opening a door for us to think differently about grading? Cheryl, what are you guys seeing as far as grading goes?
So we have a lot of districts that are kind of on the same, like I said, I work with 16 districts, so they kind of are all doing different things, but a lot of them are doing the situation where your grades, where we left was kind of the end of Q3, right? So we're locking those grades in. And if you want to improve your grade in a certain class, you have Q4 in order to do so. And so a lot of our districts have decided that the work that you put on this place forward can improve your grade, right? Now I teach dual credit class. That is not true for my class. We're grading as normal and we're continuing. But like I said, a lot of our schools have decided they're going to lock those Q3 grades in. In fact, some of our classes that we offer through the technical college, they decided that, we're at the end of March and they've taken a construction class for the entire year. At this point, we know whether or not they have the skills necessary to progress to the next course. Like we feel like they've covered the objectives. So we've looked at a lot of our courses, course by course, and determined what that policy might be, dependent on if it's a trades class versus like I teach education classes. But it's an interesting twist because I'm also a mom, right? And I have pretty good kids and they do really well in school. And that grading only when it benefits you or increases your grade is a hard one. It's a hard one for kids. And I would say my kids are pretty motivated, but it's proven to be challenging as a mom because they're finding that, my son is a senior and he's like, Mom, I'd rather spend my time working on scholarships and doing that stuff. I already have an A in calculus. I don't need to work to improve my grades. So that's been a really hard challenge as a parent to kind of encourage them to still do the work, even though they may not need to, technically. So that's been an interesting twist. I'd be interested to see how other parents are handling that conversation at home.
Yeah, Rich, what about you guys? Because you guys have taken a pretty strong stance, right, as a district.
Yeah, but ours is pretty similar. We also locked in grades third quarter, and have offered for high school students to be able to improve their grades. So they have the opportunity. They can use things that are off of our website, or they can go back to prior like if kids didn't turn a project in, those kinds of things. Or teachers can create new opportunities for kids. So we've got our students enter into a contract with their teachers to improve those grades. And so there's objectives that each teacher and student creates together. Our website, since it kind of hits the middle, may not be as rigorous as a teacher may want for their student to improve their grades. So then they'll move outside of that. And then, like Shara, if kids are in AP classes, since those tests are still going to occur, there's still some learning that's going on, and I think teachers are also reaching out, whether it's through Zoom or Google Hangouts, to help those students review. And then we have some dual enrollment classes through a community college in town that we have to still meet their objectives, right? They are the gatekeepers in a way for that. So even though our Olathe grades are locked, the grades with the school or with the college are not. And so we have kids that are still learning there. And I think that, and Shara may agree with this, that when your kids are older, like we have a junior and a senior in our house and a third grader. The third grader cannot wait to do stuff. He just had a little thing with his teacher in his class a few minutes ago, and he was so excited to show him our cat. But my senior is done, right? So that's a hard place. And so, but I'll tell you what's been really interesting is that with the older kids, there is this weird, unique opportunity for them to do something they really want to do. Like, so my senior is taking guitar lessons. And Trent, you kind of mentioned this earlier, there's an opportunity for a huge paradigm shift on the structure that we've had in place for over 100 years. And it's unfortunate that circumstances, but there is a really unique opportunity to do something different and cool. And you talk about learning that's made personal, right? Like that, like right now, there's a lot of that. And it's really neat. It's really interesting for us, both in our home and I think for the kids in our district.
Yeah. And so, Rich, you can see Brennan's question. I think it's a really good question. Like you mentioned that you've got some contracts, or you guys create contracts. Were those in place before? You guys have structured it that way, and so it carried over, or is that something you guys added after?
So universally, that's new. That was the way, that was our, when you say that you lock grades in third quarter, right? You toss accountability out the window. So the contracts was a way for us to add in that accountability piece, but it was specific to kids who wanted to improve. We have teachers that used contract learning, but not universally, and certainly not just to make up grades. So that is new for us. And that was a directive that was kind of sent from the district down to the buildings, and then the buildings worked with teachers on that. But it's so far it's been an interesting little journey, and I think that as we're in week 2, we've kind of gotten in a rhythm as to how that's going to work.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And Nancy, as you answer this question, I would love for you to take Claudia's question as well and tie those things together, because I think you probably see the spectrum in your district in terms of parents who have all kinds of access to be, for trying to create consistent environment for students, and they have access to technology and resources, and at the same time you're dealing with classrooms and schools. I've heard of school districts that are putting Wi-Fi on buses and parking buses throughout their communities so that kids have a place to go to get online, not on the bus, but near the bus. So as you're thinking about the consistency in grading, what are your thoughts with that, especially as it relates to some of our more low-income students who maybe don't have the support of parents, or who have parents that are literally, I shouldn't say, that's not a low-income issue. Parent support generally across the board right now is going to vary, not just on socioeconomics, it's just availability. We have a lot of parents that are working through this crisis with students at home who, they're trying to balance the work school balance here. What is that like for you, and things that you're seeing in Charlotte Meck, Nancy?
Right. So the whole issue of grading really has become kind of a state issue, where the state of North Carolina has basically said, if you as an LEA, a school district, cannot ensure that every child has the same access to learning opportunities, then you shall not record any grades from this point forward in Power School, which is our grading system. So we've really had to lean in on what I feel like is kind of becoming the silver lining in this, and then that's really emphasizing specific feedback and progress monitoring and feedback on student assignments that doesn't have a letter grade or a number at the top of it. But teachers are more using rubrics that help students to know, of the task that you did, this part you've got, this part you're still working on. And by the way, we'll continue working on that. Our teachers have got some time in their schedule, as I know Rich and Shara said, where it's either deemed office hours or live instruction time, and that can either be one-to-one, small group, and they're just trying to work with kids exactly where they are. And teachers were hearing, and leaders are hearing a lot about the power of specific feedback. And we've always known that, but we've not leaned into that. And in some cases, we've let grades be the thing that drove, students' motivation to actually complete a task. But I think what we're finding is what research has said all along, and that is that to the degree that you can give kids specific feedback, kind of to one of the fundamental fives, Trenton, that lets them know how they're doing, it really makes a difference. And kids will keep coming back. Even if I'm not getting a grade right now, they'll keep coming back over and over to get that specific feedback that my teacher who knows me is giving me about the work that I'm doing. And as it relates to some of the, more marginalized populations in Charlotte, what I've talked to with school leaders is, just because you don't have a kid who has a parent who's there during live learning doesn't mean you say that kid can't learn. You just take whatever you can get, whether or not it's a book that you sent them home with, or that a bus is going to drop off to their house, and the teacher is going to, meet with them periodically to just talk about their book they're reading. At least they're continuing to read, and they're getting some kind of connectivity from an educator, who cares and knows them. So I think we take what we can get, and we really lean into progress monitoring and the power of feedback to keep our kids engaged and continuing to learn.
I think it's so important, the way that you even talk through that. It shows how wildly nuanced this is and how thoughtful from a leadership perspective we have to be. I like what your state said. If there isn't equity across the board around grades, you can't create inequity by, grading students differently. I like that there's kind of a state direction there. I don't know if that's universal, but I think that's really great. One of the areas that I hear the biggest frustration that feels universal. It goes both ways. And I've talked to lots of people around the country. I keep calling people to say, tell me what it's like for you. I want to learn. I want to know. But the thing that I hear more often than not is, in our efforts to communicate, we've created inconsistency in the way that we do that. So that if you're a parent, you might receive 12,000 emails from the school in a day from all of the different teachers, and everybody's trying to be helpful and communicate. At the same time, teachers are overwhelmed with the volume of that sort of communication that's coming back at them. Have you guys done anything to try to address how to create really good channels for communication so that we can take out all the noise and maybe the frustration and the overwhelm for, all participants, students, parents, and teachers. Rich, have you guys talked about that? What has that been like for you guys?
Well, so with our teachers who are working with us on our continuous learning plan website, we have meetings set up with them on Monday and Tuesday, and then kind of a review session with them on Wednesday. So there's a very consistent week to week. This is the expectation. These are the people who are going to lead your meeting. We're going to do it through Zoom. We're going to start at this time, end at this time. And then with our parents, our communication for them has predominantly been either only from the principals and then only from the district communication department. And we have tried to collect weekly information into one email so that parents are not overwhelmed by every day. It's funny, you see kids in a different school district. My wife and I, as we've been real busy at the beginning of all this, we are like, what did we miss? Right? What parts did we not get? So I've tried to actually take that feeling back with our leadership to make sure that we are trying to limit this as much as possible, but also be as direct and specific. And it's not perfect. It's never going to be. It's in fact, with email, it's kind of like this massive game of telephone, right? You get one message from the superintendent, then to me, then to a curriculum coordinator, to teachers, but we've tried to be really limiting on how many times we communicate.
How about you guys, Nancy?
I think one of the things that we've tried to do is establish office hours, and that's a time when parents can expect that if a teacher needs to reach out to them to talk about something that's going on with their child, or from a social emotional standpoint, we've got support staff that are oftentimes reaching out to be sure that kids' social and emotional needs are being met. So we've tried to sort of carve out some clear, predictable, protected times when parents know that communication would happen. The other thing I'm seeing from school leaders often is going with what they know in terms of communication. So for many parents, their school used Dojo as a way of knowing, as it started, just how their child performed during the day. And so they're using Dojo quite often as a way to continue to communicate with a parent or upload a document that a parent doesn't have access to, those kinds of things. Sometimes it's Remind 101. So again, it's consistency, but also trying to tie that to what those parents are used to.
Shara, what about you? You get it on all sides too. You're a parent, you're a teacher, and you're also working from kind of that district capacity.
Yeah, so I think there's some formal communication things that have been really helpful. A lot of our school districts have stemmed their continuity plans from their website. And then reminding parents to check websites, using Remind, like Nancy said. Remind is a big one. Social media is a big one. To go to the website so they know where the central hub is for communication. But there are other things we can do to communicate within our Canvas space, right, that will eliminate some of that anxiety and frustration for kids. I had shared the other day with Trenton that I walked upstairs from my lesson that I was teaching with some teachers, and I walked up and my twins were having this really intense conversation. And twin A was like saying, but I don't know where to find what I'm supposed to do today. And the other twin was, well, I like it when Mrs. Nelson uses her homepage. And so they're having this conversation, and I was just a fly on the wall listening. And it's very clear to me that some of the things, even Rich had mentioned, their template is the same regardless of what grade level, right? That's comfort for people. They know what to expect, and that's a way to communicate. The same is true with Canvas. And so it was interesting that after this conversation took place with my girls, and I had mentioned it to someone, the school counselor had sent a Google form out to kids and parents and said, what is working really, really well and what is not? And I think it bubbled up that kids were frustrated because they didn't know where to go. And so that idea of using a homepage in a Canvas course to explain what to do is really super powerful. And that's a great way to communicate within Canvas if you're using that to facilitate your learning. But like I mentioned earlier, just being consistent, whether that's having a Facebook Live every week at the exact same time. Our governor provides a 2:00 broadcast every day. And for me, whatever reason, I don't get to watch the news very much, but I know he'll be on at 2:00 and I can watch him, and it provides some sort of comfort for me. So that consistency and communicating the same way, but also knowing we can improve, right? So if there's something that's not working, there is time to improve that. We have a long way to go yet. So.
Yeah, I think when we kind of think about the obstacles and challenges that teachers and students and parents and districts are facing, that we've kind of, you see this evolution of, oh my gosh, we got to do something. We've got to figure this out really, really fast. And people go to the, we're going to put together a packet or a generalized kind of a makeshift temporary solution. And then we start to see people who are looking at it from the standpoint of, what are we going to do for the next 2 months? Because we still have a quarter left of school. And the more we start to look at that, the more we realize that consistency is the thing that brings people comfort right now. That I know when things, where things are, going back to the fundamental 5, what am I supposed to do? I know what I'm supposed to do, and I know where to find that. That consistency is really important. If I have to, in every single class, figure that out, you're just adding work for everybody. You're adding work for the students, you're adding work for the parents, and then you're also creating environments where that inconsistency is only going to create more emails and more frustration, right? So we're starting to see that if we can answer the questions, the fundamental 5, what am I supposed to do? When is it due? How did I do? Can you help me? And what more can I do? That's really just a framework for creating consistency in the way that we teach and communicate with our students, the way we communicate our expectations to students. I have one other question. I know we're kind of pushing time here, but I think this is really an important one. Our teachers are doing hard work right now. They are collaborating with one another. They're scrambling. They're trying to do things that have never been done before. They're probably questioning their own efficacy on a daily basis. What are you guys doing to address those opportunities to connect with teachers? And whereas administrators, we have some consistency in the way that we are checking in to make sure our teachers are okay and that they are feeling supported and that we are hearing them and we are learning from them and that we're we're evolving based on that. Are we doing anything to actually make sure that there's some consistency around administrators, specifically like principals, connecting with teachers through some means? Nancy, what are you guys doing along those lines?
I've had just a lot of great conversations and really inspiring conversations with some of our school leaders who have really just understood from the beginning of this that how important it is to lead with the heart and the head. And that really means, understanding that we're trying to preserve a culture where people fed off of each other when they came to the building each and every day. And now trying to translate that into a virtual field where their challenges are different, they're alone, they don't have one another. So, our leaders are doing some just incredibly fun and creative things where they're like just having like virtual spirit weeks where every single day they do different things, whether it's a TikTok dance or a wear your school t-shirt and send a picture, and they create a slideshow, different ways to help teachers to be uplifted, know that they're appreciated, and feel like they're still kind of a part of that school community, and the work that they're doing is appreciated. So I think I would just encourage leaders to understand how important it is to just continue to stoke and preserve culture through creative means, letting people share their individual talents. This is interestingly a time when people emerge as leaders who can carry forward some work that you never would have thought of before, but we're in a new situation and have different needs, and opening yourself up as a leader to help people to kind of step up and into those opportunities, and how great that is when that happens for somebody who hasn't otherwise had that opportunity in the building.
Yeah, I love that, Nancy. Shara, how about you?
So we have lots of things going on. I appreciate some of our schools are having a daily Zoom, like a daily, they're starting their day off, especially when this is kind of all getting started, just to touch base every day. And like, what are the fires that we're going to put out today, right? And some of those schools, if they're big enough, they're doing grade level or department meeting Zooms as well. But trying to just be in touch. I know our team is doing the same thing, just to see what everybody's doing, if we can support anybody. But I work one-on-one with teachers. Like, that's my job. I support teachers with professional development. So I'm constantly working, and it's just been a really, like, I trained a whole faculty the last couple of weeks on how to use Canvas. Like, they're just implementing, which I don't know that I would recommend normally, but these people were like so anxious to learn because they knew it was going to help them with where they're at now. So it was like they were hungry to know, what are the tools? What are the best tools I can use? Like, keep it simple. How can I communicate effectively, be consistent? But it was like, they were so fun, and what a joy to be with. And I think people are really building relationships right now, whether that's with, I'm finding that I'm reaching out. I Zoomed a friend from Pennsylvania this week that I haven't talked to forever. And it just like made my heart so happy, right? And so I think we're doing that with our kids because we're checking on our kids. I'm texting my students saying, how are you today? Like, just want to check in, make sure you're okay. But I think we're doing that with teachers too. And I think that people are finding that that we all rely on one another heavily, right? That interaction is so huge. But we're a smaller community, obviously, but we have a parade tonight. Starts at 5 o'clock. All of our teachers have decorated their cars, and they are all going to go through our community, and they have created a route so that every kiddo that's possible in town will see the vehicles, all the teachers coming through, and then they're going to come to our local town, which is 10 miles away, and they're going to do the same thing through our town. So people are trying to find really creative ways, and I just appreciate everybody's efforts because it has been tough.
Yeah. Rich.
Sorry, couldn't find the mute. So ours is pretty similar. We have buildings are having weekly like staff meetings to be able to check in with teachers, and we're beginning to have that conversation about, okay, well, what's next, right? Like, we're kind of in this rhythm right now, but and I've been really pushing for, we have to really have not only what we believe next is going to be, but what's our contingency if it's not, right? Like, if we are going to open school the same way we're closing school, that's different than if we're going to open the doors again. And so the biggest, probably the biggest word we've used is honor, is to just make sure that when we have principals with teachers, or district leadership with administrators, or district leadership with teachers, that we are honoring their work, that we're honoring their home. We're honoring the struggle that every single, this is the interesting part to me, is that we haven't talked as much about this, but like, all of our teachers have the exact same situation that the families do, right? They are struggling. There's trauma for all of us. I mean, I don't know if the world's been turned upside down, but it's certainly sideways right now. And it is different. And we have to honor where everybody is, and we constantly want to make sure that our teachers who are helping us build content, that we are enthusiastically effusive in our praise of their efforts. We aren't picking nits with them. We've asked them to challenge themselves and to take risks, and so it's been this crazy, unique opportunity to let teachers be teachers. And so my hope is that we have been able to honor them that way by, anytime we have contact with them. I love some of the ideas, though, that Shara, the parade, and I mean, all of that is so fun. Sometimes in a larger district with giant schools, that's a little bit harder to do, but we are looking at, kind of promoting other things like that. I haven't heard mentioned yet is that from a district perspective, we are constantly in all of our communication. It starts with, like, take care of yourself. Remember that part of our insurance plan is that you have help, right? If you have the need to talk to a mental health professional, here's the phone number, here's the source, right? Like, we aren't ignoring the fact that this is equally hard for you, even though we are trying to support all of the families in our district. And And so it has given us the opportunity to grow closer as a district because we're all kind of in that same boat right now. So I think from our end, we have tried really hard, and that's another piece of our consistency, is to honor what people are doing and honor what's going on at home, and make sure that we're having those touch points constantly without overwhelming anybody. So
I love that, Rich. And I say all the time that I think that teaching is a series of complex human events on its best day. It is a series of complex human events, and what we are experiencing has only made it more complex. But the one thing that it continues to be is a human event, that we are ultimately at the end of this people connecting with other people. And we are oftentimes, as we're thinking about how we're educating students, we miss out on the simplest of things, that our goal ultimately is to make sure that the people in our sphere are okay, especially in this very complex time, and that we are doing our part every day to make sure that students are feeling some degree of normalcy. I think that's important in terms of mental health, right? That we're creating some normalcy around learning, but that we also have an eye toward the idea that it's not normal right now. And what we're doing is we're learning. And I think when we're open about what we're learning, like you guys have all shared, I think here, that only makes it better for everybody else, as everybody else is kind of questioning, are we on the right page? Are we headed in the right direction? And I think this hopefully is valuable to folks to hear your stories, to hear what you're dealing with, to see the similarities. And I'm sure people out there are facing other challenges that are unique to where they're at. But ultimately, as we talk about maintaining some degree of communication, like we did in our first webinar, and in this one around consistency, I hope that people are seeing that it's consistency around those human events, right? Like, the more consistent we are, the more we make this about supporting and helping students, the better the outcomes are going to be. So with that, I want to thank all three of you. I want to thank people who joined us on all the different mediums to hear your contributions. Thank you so much. We are going to do this again next Tuesday at 10:30. We're going to be talking about school culture. And I'm really excited about that, because I think that's kind of that next level of, once we've thought about our communication, our consistency, how are we maintaining culture or creating new culture in our schools? So Rich, thank you. Shara, thank you. Nancy, thank you. Mark behind the scenes, thank you. And everybody who joined us today, I want to thank you.